Under the pale wash of Los Angeles streetlights, Dylan's name had become a curse. Ever since she had stood trembling but resolute before Finn and Steffi to confess that she was the one who had hit Luna, the city that once applauded her artistry now turned its eyes away in disgust. Her admission was meant to be an act of redemption, a way to free herself from the corrosive weight of guilt that had devoured her sleep and painted her days in gray. Instead, it branded her as the villain in a tragedy that everyone wanted someone to blame for. News anchors called her reckless. The press camped outside her studio. Strangers spat at her name online. And the people she once called friends vanished, as if association itself were contagious. Every night, Dylan returned to her studio, that echoing, half-lit space filled with canvases she could no longer bear to finish. The scent of turpentine and dust clung to her skin like punishment. Sometimes she would catch her reflection in the wide window, pale and hollow-eyed, and not recognize the person staring back. She told herself that confession was supposed to heal, that truth was cleansing. But there was no healing in the hate that followed. There was only survival. The night she was attacked, the air felt wrong. She had stayed late, finishing a painting meant to be her apology to Luna's memory, something soft, luminous, forgiving. The city outside was asleep, the hum of traffic replaced by the restless whisper of wind. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were too close. A shadow detached itself from the alley and moved toward her, quick, deliberate. There was the crack of shattering glass, a brief struggle, then darkness. When neighbors found her hours later, Dylan was barely breathing, her face bloodied, her hands still clutching the edge of her canvas, as though it were a lifeline. The news broke before sunrise. Hit-and-run killer attacked in mysterious assault. The irony was grotesque. For once, the headlines didn't lie. No one wanted justice for Dylan. Only spectacle. But the brutality of the attack stunned even those who hated her. Finn was called to the hospital out of protocol, but when he saw her broken body, something in him twisted. Luna's death still haunted him, yet the sight of Dylan fighting for her life ignited the old instinct of the healer within him. He wanted to hate her, to turn away, but his conscience refused to. Steffi watched him, her jaw tight, knowing exactly what his pity could cost them. The investigation began as routine but quickly spiraled into chaos. The list of potential suspects grew longer by the hour, each name a mirror reflecting back fragments of motive, guilt, and rage. Finn, whose grief for Luna had never faded, was an obvious target for suspicion. He had been one of the last people to see Dylan alive before her confession, and the nurses whispered about his late-night absences from the hospital. Steffi, ever the protector, had motive of her own, to eliminate the woman who had shattered her family's peace. Will, tortured by guilt over Luna's death and the role his argument had played that night, had grown erratic, unpredictable. Electra, once Dylan's confidant, now avoided every mention of her, too perfectly, as if hiding something. And then there was Sheila, who seemed to orbit every tragedy like a moth circling flame, turning other people's misery into ammunition. Even Bill's name surfaced in rumors. His empire had grown too used to secrecy, and Dylan had once known too much about Spencer's backstage dealings to be allowed peace. Every suspect carried scars, some visible, some buried, but all had the same shadow hovering over them. Opportunity. The police interviews became a theater of masks. Finn swore he'd left the hospital late that night, but security footage showed his car parked near Dylan's block for 20 minutes unaccounted for. Steffi claimed she'd been home, yet neighbors remembered hearing her car door around midnight. Will's knuckles were bruised. He said it was from training, but the timing felt wrong. Electra wore long sleeves despite the summer heat, and when questioned, her tone cracked ever so slightly. Sheila's alibi was airtight on paper, but no one could prove where she'd been during the missing 10 minutes before the attack. Even Bill couldn't explain why his private security logs were tampered with the same night Dylan was left bleeding on the pavement. As detectives peeled back the layers, the investigation began to reveal things that had nothing to do with Luna. Forrester's pristine reputation started to show fissures, irregular contracts, plagiarized designs, secret payments hidden in charity accounts. Spencer Publications faced its own exposure. Leaked emails suggesting deals with hospital donors tied to experimental treatments. The case against an unknown assailant became a mirror reflecting everyone's corruption. Each new revelation dragged another name through the mud until guilt became a contagion. At the center of it all lay Dylan, silent and suspended between life and death. Machines breathed for her. Monitors mapped her heart in jagged lines. Finn spent sleepless nights in her room, studying the rise and fall of her chest, haunted not just by what had happened to her, but by what she might have known. Steffi's patience fractured. "She destroyed us once," she told him. "Don't let her do it again." But Finn couldn't shake the feeling that Dylan's attack was not random vengeance. There had been precision in the injuries, purpose in the violence. It was not rage, it was silencing. Weeks later, a security video surfaced from a convenience store across the street from Dylan's studio. The footage showed a hooded figure following her, then a struggle obscured by the camera's blind spot. But the crucial seconds, the moment of impact, were cut. Someone had edited the video before it reached the police. The internet exploded with theories. Some swore it was Finn. Others pointed to Will's trembling interviews or Electra's evasive silence. Online forums dissected every frame, drawing battle lines between fans of each family. Forrester versus Spencer, logic versus emotion, truth versus survival. The pressure became unbearable. The Forrester family's lawyers pushed for the investigation to close, arguing that the public frenzy endangered innocent lives. The Spencers demanded transparency, claiming a conspiracy to protect the rich. And somewhere in the chaos, Finn uncovered what no one wanted to see. The autopsy report from Luna's death had been altered again. The same handwriting that appeared in Dylan's medical chart. Identical slant, identical ink. Two tragedies, linked by one unseen hand. Finn's mind churned through possibilities until one theory began to take shape, a story that explained both Luna's death and Dylan's silence. What if Dylan hadn't just confessed to clear her conscience? What if she had seen something the night Luna died, something that made her own life expendable? He remembered the way she hesitated during her confession, the tremor in her voice when she said, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." At the time, he had thought she meant the accident. Now, he wondered if she meant something else entirely. He returned to Dylan's studio after police released it. The space was cold, sterile, emptied of life. But as he examined the floor near where she had fallen, he noticed faint smears of paint on the corner of the shattered canvas, paint that wasn't hers. Under blacklight, it revealed a hidden layer beneath her final work, a fragment of a license plate number scrawled beneath a wash of crimson. Luna's car. Dylan had been painting the truth, hiding it in color, and someone had found out. The revelation shattered what little order remained. Finn confronted Bill first. The older man denied any involvement, but his fury at being questioned betrayed him. "You think you're the only one who wants answers?" he snapped. "You think I don't wake up every night seeing what she did to my family?" But beneath his rage was fear, the kind that only appears when power trembles. Finn left convinced that Bill knew more than he'd admit. Steffi's faith in her husband crumbled under the strain. Ridge demanded she protect the family name, warning that Finn's crusade was dragging Forrester into ruin. "He's not looking for justice," Ridge said coldly. "He's looking for absolution." Steffi, torn between love and loyalty, began to doubt her own reflection. Was Finn obsessed, or simply the only one brave enough to face the rot beneath their world? Meanwhile, Electra's composure cracked. She had been seen visiting the hospital late at night, her eyes red, her movements frantic. When questioned, she claimed she was checking on Dylan, but records showed she had requested access to restricted medical files. Her guilt wasn't about Luna, it was about something buried deeper, a secret arrangement between her former company and the same corporate donors now under scrutiny. Will, fragile and impulsive, confronted her one evening. Their argument was overheard by neighbors, their voices sharp with accusation and grief. The next day, Electra vanished. By the time she resurfaced, the entire case had twisted into something unrecognizable. Detectives announced that new evidence pointed away from revenge and toward conspiracy. Dylan, still unconscious but stable, became the silent center of a storm of revelations. Her blood work showed traces of the same unapproved sedative found in Luna's toxicology report, the one tied to the hospital's illegal drug trials. Someone had used both women to hide something catastrophic: the collapse of a medical program that linked the Spencer, Forrester, and hospital investments into one intricate network of profit and deception. Dylan's confession had been inconvenient truth. Her attack was the cover-up. The climax came when a new video leaked online, unedited this time. It showed the assailant approaching Dylan, pausing under a flickering streetlight. The figure removed their hood for just a second, enough to reveal a scar along the jawline. It was the same scar Finn remembered from an anonymous donor he had once treated, a man tied to the hospital's corporate board. The motive was no longer personal vengeance, but corporate survival. Dylan had seen him leaving the restricted ward the night Luna died. She hadn't been the cause of the tragedy. She had been the witness. In the aftermath, the city tore itself apart searching for someone to blame. Finn exposed the truth at great cost. His marriage in ruins, his career suspended, his family divided. Bill's empire suffered as Spencer's financial entanglements came to light. Steffi, weary and wounded, withdrew from the public eye. The hospital board resigned in disgrace, though most would resurface under new names. Dylan eventually awoke, fragile and disoriented, unable to remember the final moments before the attack. Perhaps it was mercy, perhaps it was protection. Yet beneath all the shattered lives, something like clarity remained. The tragedy of Luna's death had never been about one driver or one mistake. It was about a system that consumed truth to protect itself. Dylan's confession, her suffering, even Finn's relentless pursuit, all led to the same revelation, that in a world built on secrets, honesty is the most dangerous weapon of all. As the final headlines faded, Dylan stood once more in her studio, staring at the unfinished canvas she had nearly died for. The light through the cracked window turned the dried streaks of paint into veins of gold. She lifted her brush with trembling fingers, not to erase the past but to capture it, to paint the moment when silence finally broke. In that fragile act, she found what no confession, no investigation, no justice had ever given her: peace. Weeks turned into months, yet the echoes of that night never truly left Los Angeles. The city wore the scandal like an unhealed wound, whispers in every corridor, headlines that refused to die, and families broken beneath the weight of truth. Dylan had survived, but the woman who awoke in that hospital bed was not the same artist who once painted forgiveness into color. Her memory came back in fragments, flashes of headlights, the scent of smoke, the metallic taste of fear, but the face of her attacker remained hidden behind the fog of trauma. The doctors called it selective amnesia, but Finn knew better. It wasn't that she couldn't remember, it was that someone didn't want her to. Her recovery became a symbol, an uncomfortable reminder to everyone who had something to hide. Reporters staked out the hospital, speculating about what she might say once she could speak again. Finn visited her daily, though the distance between them was now filled with unspoken questions. He wanted to believe she was safe, but the pattern of surveillance around her room, guards hired by anonymous donors, restricted access, misplaced medical charts, told him the opposite. He recognized the quiet choreography of suppression. The truth hadn't been buried, it was being managed. Steffi watched all of it from the periphery, trapped in a purgatory between loyalty and disbelief. The Forrester name had taken damage in the fallout, its once glittering reputation dimmed by association with corruption. Ridge insisted the family distance themselves from Finn, from Dylan, from everything that could drag their name back into scandal. But Steffi's heart refused obedience. She still loved the man who had risked everything for the truth, even if that truth had burned their life to the ground. When she saw him one night outside the hospital, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion, she walked toward him before reason could stop her. Their conversation was short, raw, and devastating. "I try to protect what we built," she whispered. But you went to war with it instead. Finn's reply was simple, because someone had to. Meanwhile, Dylan's slow return to consciousness began drawing out ghosts she hadn't expected. The first thing she asked for when she could speak was her paintings. Not her clothes, not her phone, her art. When they were brought to her, she began examining them like evidence, scanning every brushstroke, every hidden layer. She was searching for something, though she couldn't explain what. "It's there," she murmured once to Finn. "Whatever I saw, it's here, in the colors." He didn't understand then, but he soon would. Across the city, Will Spencer wrestled with his own guilt. Luna's death had left a wound that time hadn't touched, and Dylan's confession had turned that wound septic. He had thought her attack might bring him closure, but instead it deepened the ache. When the truth of the corporate conspiracy surfaced, Will began to see Luna's death not as an accident, but as collateral damage in a web spun long before that night. He started investigating on his own, hacking into Spencer servers, combing through emails and financial records. What he found made his blood run cold. There were payment trails to offshore accounts, private medical reports coded under false names, and encrypted communications between the hospital board and a shadow group of investors. At the center of it all was a name he hadn't expected, Heliopath Asia, the same subsidiary tied to Luna's former company. When he brought his findings to Finn, the pieces finally began to align. The hit on Luna, the manipulation of Dylan, even the assault, it all pointed toward a coordinated effort to protect a secret drug program that had begun overseas. Luna had discovered evidence of illegal testing tied to fashion wellness products promoted by Forrester's Asian division. Dylan had seen something that night, someone transporting evidence from Luna's car before the police arrived. She hadn't just confessed to an accident, she had walked into a battlefield. As the threads connected, Finn realized the conspiracy wasn't contained to the hospital. It reached into media, finance, and even law enforcement. When he attempted to share the evidence, he was stonewalled. Witnesses retracted statements. Files disappeared. A detective working the Dylan case was found dead in his car, an apparent suicide that no one believed. The air in Los Angeles thickened with paranoia. It wasn't justice they were chasing anymore, it was survival. Dylan left the hospital under police protection, though she knew protection meant little in a city where power rewrote the rules. Her hands shook when she tried to paint, but she forced herself to. Each brushstroke became an act of defiance. The painting she finished first was unlike anything she'd ever done before, a swirl of black and crimson shaped like a spiral, almost hypnotic. Finn, visiting her in her new safe house, froze when he saw it. The pattern mirrored the logo of Heliopath, hidden beneath layers of paint. "You remembered," he said softly. Dylan's eyes filled with tears. "I never forgot," she replied. Steffi, drawn back into the chaos she had tried to escape, began facing questions from the board about her family's financial ties to Heliopath's wellness line. The documents Will uncovered linked Forrester's newest skincare project to the same funding stream as the experimental treatments tested on patients, like Luna. Every charitable donation, every partnership had been a mask for human trials that violated international law. Steffi's world began to collapse from within. To protect the company, Ridge ordered a full legal offensive, silencing whistleblowers and discrediting Finn publicly as unstable. The tabloids feasted on it. One headline read, "Disgraced doctor obsessed with dead woman's case." But the truth had already found its way into the light. A whistleblower inside Heliopath leaked a set of encrypted files to the press, emails proving that the assault on Dylan had been orchestrated by a corporate cleanup team, the same one that handled Luna's disappearance. Within hours, the story exploded globally. The hospital's board was indicted. Heliopath's stock plummeted. And Spencer Publications, whose CEO had authorized the legal settlements, faced the threat of collapse. Bill tried to contain the damage, but even he couldn't fight the storm. For the first time, his empire trembled. As chaos unfolded, Dylan disappeared again, this time by choice. Finn searched for her, haunted by the possibility that the truth had finally consumed her. When he found her weeks later, she was living by the coast, in a small house overlooking the gray Pacific. She had been painting again, but the canvases were different, filled not with darkness, but light. When she saw him, she didn't speak. She just handed him a new painting. It was Luna, standing on the shoreline, her reflection merging with the water. Beneath it, barely visible, were the words, "She never left." The revelation hit him like a storm. "You think she's alive," he whispered. Dylan nodded slowly. "I don't think I know. They never killed her. They hid her." It sounded impossible, but Finn's heart refused to dismiss it. The inconsistencies in the reports, the unaccounted patient files, the anonymous witness who once claimed to see a woman matching Luna's description transferred to a private wing, it all came rushing back. What if Luna had survived that night? What if the hospital had staged her death to erase the evidence of their crimes? Driven by equal parts desperation and hope, Finn began investigating again. He traced Heliopatha's remaining facilities, following whispers across continents: Singapore, Seoul, Zurich. Each lead brought him closer to something vast and terrifying, a hidden network of experimental clinics disguised as wellness retreats, funded by the same corporations that had nearly destroyed them. And at the edge of this labyrinth stood one final clue, a patient listed only as L07, transferred from Los Angeles 3 days after Luna's supposed death. The journey took him far from Los Angeles, to a private island off the coast of Japan, where Heliopath maintained a rehabilitation center for trauma victims. The facility was pristine, almost holy in its stillness. And there, among rows of patients recovering from mysterious accidents, he saw her. Luna.
Alive.
Fragile.
Changed.
Her eyes opened as if waking from a long nightmare. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You finally found me." Back in Los Angeles, Dylan's paintings began appearing anonymously in galleries, each one a message, a confession, a map. One piece showed the silhouette of a woman breaking through glass. Another depicted two figures walking through water toward light. Critics called it rebirth art, but those who knew the truth understood it was a chronicle of survival. When Finn brought Luna home, the world erupted again. The case became an international scandal, a morality tale about greed, power, and the cost of silence. Forrester's board fractured under pressure. Spencer's empire bled money and trust. But amidst the ruins, something unexpected grew: compassion. Steffi, seeing Luna alive, finally understood the magnitude of what Finn had fought for. Her anger dissolved into awe. "You never stopped believing," she said. He took her hand, not as victory, but as forgiveness. Dylan, watching from afar, smiled through tears. Her story had begun with confession and ended with resurrection, not hers, but Luna's. In her final painting of the series, she captured the moment of that reunion. 3 figures standing under a stormlit sky, the sea behind them reflecting both darkness and light. Beneath it, she wrote, "Truth is the wound that never heals, but it's the only thing that keeps us alive." And so, in a city built on illusion, the truth finally stood naked, unashamed. It didn't fix everything, it never could. But it forced everyone, from the powerful to the broken, to see what they had become. For Finn, for Steffi, for Dylan, and for Luna, redemption was not an ending. It was the fragile, trembling beginning of something far rarer. Peace born from pain, light reclaimed from shadow, and love, scarred, imperfect, but still surviving.